Welcome to the Honest Field Guide podcast, a weekly show dedicated to winning in entrepreneurship. I'm your host, JinJa Birkenbeuel. I'm the CEO of Burt Creative, a leadership, brand strategy, and visual identity agency dedicated to helping scale brands and assist with their adaptability with the market. On my show, you get to eavesdrop in on intimate conversation with business leaders and inspired entrepreneurs, designed to give you tips and strategies so your own business can thrive. Subscribe and join me each week for laughter, inspiration, and honest stories. Hey, everybody. Welcome to my show, the Honest Field Guide podcast. My name is JinJa Birkenbeuel, your host, and I'm so glad you're joining me today on my show. You could be listening anywhere, as I always say, but you've decided to come here to listen to the Honest Field Guide podcast, and I'm so grateful for that. If you could please take a few minutes and like my show, subscribe to my show on Spotify, listen to it on Apple, leave a 4-star review. That would be fantastic. Every time I get a good review, that's a good thing for my show, for myself, and also especially for my guest. I would suggest leaving a like and a follow on TikTok, but I'm not too sure about that these days. But TikTok has a great platform for my show as well, the Honest Field Guide podcast. So anyway, I want to get right into this because I have somebody really amazing on my show today. And, I'll just be very transparent. I did not grow up being a fan of sports, mostly because my mother would not let me play sports in school, right? And when I did tried to play sports, I was never chosen to be on the team. No one ever wanted me because I wasn't very good. I was awkward. And, the most part when I was a kid, my mom was like, you're going to run free and be wild. You're going to be a free spirit. I'm going to let you do whatever you want, which pretty much what it was like. And I was the kind of kid that didn't get into a lot of trouble. I was an artist. She took me to libraries and stuff. I wasn't playing sports. I never watched sports. And I really didn't understand any of it until I met my husband, to be honest. And he played Division I football at NIU and Northern Illinois University. And he's a sports fanatic. And I just feel like, there's just this saying that, God doesn't give you what you want, gives you what you need, I guess. And this man that I married, seriously, screaming at the top of his lungs at DePaul Blue Demons basketball, which never made any sense to me because he didn't go to school there. Throwing remotes doing Bears games, lost his mind when the White Sox won the World Series in 2005. And he said some of the most horrible things that would probably get him arrested when they won. It was just like, I was like, who is this person? And then when the Cubs won in 2016, it was like, okay, thank God, because it was a brutal, 10 years. Our first year of marriage, we went to a Blackhawks game. I had no idea how to follow the puck. I didn't understand the rules. I was like, it was insanity. I was like, how did this happen to me? Right. I've only been to 2 Bulls games in my whole life. And, but what's really bizarre is like, I grew up in a house where the Olympics were the thing. And my mom, she used to have like dozens and dozens of VHS tapes with the Olympics, and Olympics was a sport that I watched. And so here's the iron of it all. I ended up having 3 children with my husband, 2 of which are athletes. One is a Division I volleyball player at Merrimack College in Massachusetts, my son Dallas Birkenbeuel, and then my youngest son is a varsity hockey player at Loyola Academy, in Wilmette, Illinois. And my other son, he likes to joke that he is an athlete. He's just a musical athlete because he's an elite pianist in New York at Manhattan School of Music. But anyway, it's like having an athlete, a hockey player. It's just bananas, right? All through the years when they finally were in sports, and, thank God they didn't play football. That's my personal opinion. My life changed. I became a boy mom really quick, and I had to learn a lot of things: the traveling, the money, the uniforms, the culture of parents that have sports athlete children. It was like, I was like, what is, what is this? And then at one point, my middle son, who's this Division I volleyball player, when he was in high school, he got recruited, and I was just like, okay, where am I going to get the money to get him to college? And I was really stunned to discover how little money there is, not only in high school athletics, but especially in an NCAA sport that isn't really funded like basketball and football, right? And I was like, what the heck am I going to do? What am I going to do? I need money for this kid. But fast forward, Fast Company magazine. I go there annually to the Fast Company Innovation Festival, and I had this opportunity to go to an all-women sports panel where they talked about how the industry has changed for the better, everybody's focusing on women's sports. Money's starting to flow a little bit. Attention's coming, and at the moment, I was sitting there thinking to myself, great, great. I got two boys playing sports, and I can't figure out how to get the money, and all the money is going to the women. And I'm a woman, obviously, and I'm just like, okay, what does this mean? And I was able to raise my hand, and I got to talk to a woman she's the woman who created the brand refresh for Ellie the Elephant. And I got to ask a question related to NIL, which is name, image, likeness, money, and college scholarships, because I'm totally broke. If anybody can hear this, please help me get money for my kids to go to college, please. But she introduced me to a man after the panel. His name is Joe Favorito. He's a sports entrepreneur, reporter, publicist who has won or been a finalist for a Tony, Clio Sports, Sports Emmy, and so much more. He's got an amazing book, which, by the way, is about to be updated, called Sports Publicity: A Practical Approach. He's worked on films. He loves films, television, sports teams. I mean, and we had the best conversation walking through the streets of New York. And I was like, are you a native New Yorker? He's like, yeah. And, we talked about our children and we talked about the election, and I just loved him. I'm like, you know what? You're coming on my show. Joe, welcome to my show.
Thank you, JinJa. That was, you did that all without stopping to breathe at all. That was pretty impressive.
Should I be a sports announcer? Can I do it?
You could be an auctioneer at that point.
Oh my God. Was it that fast? All right. Well, listen, I'm going to be very transparent. I don't one of the things that my husband's always joking with me about, he's like, hey, you know what? Don't ever talk about sports and don't ever talk about music because you don't know what you're talking about. That's what so I'm going to be transparent. I don't have a lot of information on sports stats, right? I love sports now because I have athletes. I don't even understand many of the rules, right? So, but I do know a lot about business. I know a lot about business. And what I loved about reading about you is you are an entrepreneur, you're a business person. You worked in different leagues and different places doing so many things. And I'm just kind of curious, how in the world did you become an entrepreneur in the world of sports versus, staying in the corporate space or staying working for a newspaper writing about sports?
Our business closed. That's how I got thrown into this 17 years ago. So, but it's funny, you mentioned sports. There's no difference between sports and movies and Broadway. It's all about storytelling. All it is who we love, who are the heroes and villains, what gets us excited about whatever we want to do, whether that's music, film, science. It doesn't really matter. The thing that matters is you find something that's interesting with you, and you find a community to build around it. And no matter what it is that you want to do, whether it's poker or chess or STEM activities, that's the most important thing. So you don't have to know about sports. What you have to know about is the interesting personalities that I want to learn more about.
Interesting. So your business shut down. What are you talking about? Which business is that? Because I did look you up, and there's not a whole lot about your background. And that's sort of the premise of my show, right? Understanding who this person is and where they came from. So what about your parents? What were they entrepreneurs? Did they have a business? Did you grow up playing sports? Did you love sports? Did you hate it? What was going on?
I loved sports growing up. I pretty much broke every bone in my body growing up. I was always in the emergency room doing something wrong. I wanted to try everything. But the interesting thing was my father, who was a lawyer, said, you can also write. And, there was nothing really about the media company at that point. Keep in mind that I'm old. I'm 61. So
I would hardly call that. Okay, wait. I would hardly call that old.
I'm emerging.
That's going a little too far.
So, but what I found was I was around a lot of people who were really talented athletes, really, really talented athletes. And when I went to Fordham University after I graduated from high school, we had an amazing radio station. And the talented people who were on the radio station became my friends at 18. So they're my friends today who, broadcast for the Yankees and the Rangers and the New York Giants and the NBA. And we just kind of built a commonality around what we were interested in. Some of it was music, some of it was news, some of it was sports. And the interesting thing was my freshman year in college was the last year that the drinking age in New York City was 18. So my parents dropped me off at Fordham, and there's a story in New York Magazine. The three largest consumers of beer in New York City were Yankee Stadium, Shea Stadium, and Fordham University, 1, 2, and 3. And my cousin managed the bar that was on campus. So there was a little bit of kind of a camaraderie around alcohol, I guess, when you're that age. But the other thing that it did was it brought us out where we were able to go to bars where media people were congregating. So I have vivid memories. There was a bar named Runyon's, 52nd Street and 2nd Avenue in Manhattan. And we would go in there, and sitting at the bar would be Mike Lupica, who's won all these awards over the years, Thomas Wolfe, who wrote Bonfire of the Vanities, are sitting there at the bar, and we were able to drink and listen to them all the time. And that's how we really started to learn about what storytelling was. And that has not changed. But how I got to where I am now, 17 years on my own, we ran a mixed martial arts league called the International Fight League. We raised $35 million in the public markets with a terrible business plan. We ended up with a great business plan and no money at the end after 2.5 years. We learned a tremendous amount, sold the assets to the UFC, and I was kind of cast into this, what am I going to do next? And again, as you mentioned, some of it's luck. I got a call from a gentleman named John Ginzali. He said, Columbia University is starting the only sports management graduate program in the Ivy League. We're looking for someone to teach a program on communications. Would you like to do it? And by the way, we also have a publisher who's looking to create a book around it. Would you like to do that? Sure, why not? And then the other thing that I found was the relationships that you have over time. Those people who I knew said, you know what, you got to just go do this on your own. You can do it on your own. So 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago now, I got thrown into the entrepreneurial pool with no life jacket at all and was told to swim. And I learned how to swim because the people who were swimming around me kept lifting me up. That's really how it happened. And then one thing led to another. And I will tell you that there has been absolutely no plan. You know, I've worked on 5 Broadway shows, countless movies, startups, you know, Nickelodeon launching a sports platform, Bloomberg launching a sports platform. And the goal was to figure out to listen to everybody there, figure out what their story was, and figure out how we could keep monetizing it over time. And eventually some people would sell it off. Some people had terrible stories. They went and did something else. But it all came down to the core of how you figure out how to tell your story and who are the audiences that you're trying to tell it to.
I want to go back a little bit because one of the things that's always really challenging for people, especially young people and people that are in business, is how do you actually get in the room in the first place? And you kind of skipped over that part. Like, you were talking about the icing on the cake, but you really weren't talking about the foundation building. Now, you did mention that some of the people that carried you through these spaces you met when you were a teenager. And I always hear about, the company you keep is the most important company of your life, and it really does determine your destiny, your future. Can you talk a little? Was it just an accident that you were with these people, or were you strategic and intentional about it? I mean, I will just make a plug. Gen X is the greatest generation. Okay, but I feel like you were just sort of. Was it all luck that you were in these rooms that got you here?
I think you create your own luck. I think the biggest thing is showing up, and I would say post COVID, and I tell our students all the time, and I tell other people looking to create jobs, you have to show up. Because the randomness, especially in a street like New York, a city like New York, you never know who you're going to run into if you're willing to listen. And the other thing that I tell a lot of my students is sometimes you have to be cautious enough, but challenged enough to go and take a path because the path is choosing you. You're not choosing the path. Sometimes you walk into a wall. Sometimes it's a yellow brick road. But if you don't go down the path and see what's there and look to your left and your right, you never know who you're going to meet or what you're going to find. I've found throughout my entire career, I'm blessed by being around amazing people who I've been able to listen to and figure out how we can solve a lot of problems, and that's part of it. But I think at the end of the day, showing up is the most important thing. Even though we are on a screen, we met literally in a building in Manhattan at the Skim and walked down 14th Street for 3 blocks. And that's kind of how we met, and that's where we talked. But if I wouldn't have come up to you or listened to what you were talking about your high school, your son who plays high school hockey. I don't know if we would have started a conversation, but it was because you stood up and asked a question. And I said, that's kind of interesting. And that's how we got to where we are now.
I love it. And, one of the things I actually did want to talk about, we might as well go there. You talked about looking up. What I noticed about young people is they're not looking up. They're on their devices. And if I bring it to the sports space, what sort of concerns me, and maybe this is just my existential threat, anxieties that I have all the time, is like, okay, so if you have a young person who only consumes sports with little clips, TikToks, Instagrams, and they only consume sports by playing NBA 2K, and they follow all the players through AI agents that are in these games, and that's how they learn about the game, but they've never actually been to a game for a multitude of reasons, one in which the game is actually really expensive. It's hard to buy a ticket. Any of these sports events, it's expensive. So, and I don't want to totally have the entire show about this, but my question has always been, if this is how young people are being cultivated now, I'm on the fan space versus the creator space, which you were just talking about. What does that mean for this industry? Because I have a young son, for example, and he plays hockey and he's a varsity player. He's really good, but his experience actually looking up and experiencing the world that you described it, and even playing the sports or watching the players, it's just not there. And I'm like, okay, is he being cultivated to become a gambler? Because he's learning how to pull slot machines by, online betting, right? So it seems like you're describing a world that I feel doesn't really exist anymore. I stood up and asked the question because that's my world. I'm trying to envision my young person doing what I did. I feel like there's special kids that do that, but there used to be more of us that would do that, and now there's not. So, I guess this is like a question about the future. It's a little bit of a big one.
Personally, I'm more excited about the future than I've ever been.
Oh my God, I love you. You're
because
positive.
We're in a global environment now. We can learn in an instant things that are going on around the world, and I think young people will help us solve a lot of the problems that us older people can't solve. I also think that you can go back 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, 40 years, 300 years. Every medium that came along was going to destroy everybody. There's a quote that I use in my class that says, the media is the death of us. It is going to ruin everything that we're going to say. I cannot be friends with these people. They don't listen to me. They're going to kill my career. And that was James Madison, President James Madison. So when you think about the evolution of the media, radio was going to kill everything. Television was going to kill everything. The internet was going to kill everything. Esports was going to kill everything. It doesn't kill anything. We have to adapt, just like we're going to adapt to artificial intelligence and use it as a tool to benefit us. That's the way it works. And that's the way it's worked for 2,000 years. Storytelling has not changed in 2,000 years. We're here the week before Christmas. Some of the greatest stories were written down, passed down verbally, written by members of the clergy, passed along individually until the printing press came along. Then all of a sudden, everybody's able to read this stuff. So the thing that's changed now is we have everything at our fingertips, and it's coming at us faster than ever before. I think one of the things we have to do with young people is help them manage time and take pressure off themselves, because the self-imposed pressure on them is worse than anything else. But I think that there are ways to do that, coping mechanisms that exist all the time. And by the way, listening to them about what's really important to them and figuring out how you can adapt it to a path that makes sense.
I love it. So I was just on a show, big technology podcast, and we were talking about some of these topics. And I think that, yes, you're right about, students and young people being hope for the future. I guess what I'm really concerned about is you're in an environment where you have curious students and families that are well-resourced, and they're there for a reason, and they're kind of a little bit more engaged in a different level. I'm just looking at a really young group of people that maybe don't have that curiosity, and they don't really want to read books, and they're not able to, cite former presidents and, quote, old technology. So I do have hope, and I do think there's young people that can help solve problems because they're more locked into, innovation and ideas. I feel like finding those young people and people like that is a little bit different than it used to be, because there's so many people that are captivated by this magical box that we all spend our times looking at. And I'm just, I'm a little different. I mean, I feel like, you find a place for the positive light, and so do I. But when it comes to this, and especially the way I see these young people engaging in games online, I feel like, when are we going to get to a place where we're actually engaging in real physical sports at scale again? Because when I was growing up as a kid, everybody was involved in sports. Now, there wasn't as much money in sports as there is now, but we were all doing things. We were all outside, and that's just not really happening right now to me. So I just worry a little bit about that. I don't ever want live sports to go away. And actually, I feel like, to me, live sports is the last frontier of human experience at this point. To me, it's literally the last place that we're all getting together to meet, except for, we were at the Skim, which is, by the way, amazing. But for the most part, live sports is like so powerful and so engaging, and I love it. But I do want to move on to something else, because this is an important question I have for you. Crisis communications. Okay. So this is an area that you have a tremendous amount of expertise, right? And in my company, Burke Creative, some of the work I do is not the actual crisis communications implementation part, but it's having conversations around why you need to be prepared for crisis, and how you need to have people in place to prepare for crisis, and how you should separate crisis communications people on your social media channels from people that actually create content. Those are not two places. Those are not two brains. Those are two different roles, right? So when I was at the festival this past year, I was at an event and it was really fascinating to me. There was an ad agency. They were focusing on a basketball player, a rookie that just came in, and he's like transformed the world, and he's really amazing, and he's God fearing, and he has a lot of perfection, pillars in his life. And someone from the audience asked, a what if question. What if this happens? What will you do? And I wasn't shocked by the question. I was shocked by the response from the people on the panel that were representing the athlete, the ad agency, and the brand. And their response was, we're not going to talk about what if. Nobody was prepared to even answer the person's question. And it was like, somebody actually started laying out all the amazing things about this athlete. And I thought to myself, that was a missed opportunity to really help the audience understand that we're in an environment of crisis, and how will you handle this, and how will you protect the athlete, and how will you respond, and are you ready? And I want your ideas on this, because when I did some work for a corporation a while ago, and I provided strategies and counseling on trying to help them reorganize their social media team, and they did it. They reorganized their social media team and separated their crisis team from their creation team. It was the best thing they ever did. But can you talk a little bit about why it's important to be prepared for crisis, even if you have a perfect candidate? And how do you actually, and let me just say one more thing. How do you staff an environment like that? Like, who do you need to be ready for today's environment?
So a couple things. One is, as positive as I am about where we're going, my glass is always half empty. I'm always.
You just snatched it back.
Right. Well, like, I'm looking out the window right now and it's snowing. So I'm ready for the rainy day. I think you always have to be prepared. And that's, by the way, that's the nature of sports. When you think about it, if you play professional baseball and you're successful 30% of the time, you're in the Hall of Fame. There's no other business that's like that. 30%, 70% failure rate, and you're one of the greatest of all time. So you have to constantly be learning from loss. And that's what I think great coaches who are teachers know how to do. Figure out what we learned from the experience that we had, and always be ready for the rainy day. I think the two things, ironically, that most people in a business, a 24/7 business now, are not prepared for are the brightest of sunshine and the darkest of days. Because they don't know how to handle sometimes the greatest success and how to maximize that. And they certainly are worried about what's going to happen when everything falls down, but they don't want to deal with it. And, it's insurance. I tell people who I talk to on crisis all the time, it's like, so let me get this straight. Everything is going great. You're driving along in your car. Do you wake up one day and say, oh, I'm just going to cancel my insurance? So you have to have that insurance. And by the way, the seasoned people at the table at the beginning of when you're signing someone or you're dealing with launching a product, who can sit there and say, this is all great. Let me just kind of set up just in case it doesn't go well. And then you have that file, that, thing on your phone, whatever it is, so that you're able to think, pause, determine. Now we have plenty of tools that tell us about social listening, how big the problem is or how big it is not. And the most important thing is, don't make it worse. Because a lot of people, especially in social media, and you've seen this with microphones, somebody puts a microphone in front of your face, the first thing you want to do is answer the question. The most important thing you could do is say nothing and listen to what they're saying, because you have the control, not them. And that's a really, really hard thing, especially for young people to understand who've been on these devices for years, because they can go to TikTok or X or Blue Sky or Insta stories and put something out there to the world anytime they want. You just have to make sure that you're informed and you know what you're doing when you say it.
Right. And so when you are, talking to, people in the business of sports, and you do a lot of talking around this, do you find that they have a separate role for this? Or, because you mentioned something about the contracts, and that's on the player side, but what about the management side? I just feel like a lot of the things I've been seeing the last couple years, they have not handled personalities, crisis, volatile conversations, triggering things well. It's just been like one thing after another, where I don't feel like the corporate side knows what they're doing and nobody's telling them what to do.
Well, two things. You can tell people all you want, whether they listen to you or not, that's up to them. The other thing I would say is, like anywhere in the world, there are thousands and thousands of people doing amazing work that you never find out about because they've been able to stop the problem before it happened. And what you see are the great crashes, and we love the spectacular in media. We love heroes and villains. We love Dennis Rodman, because it makes us interesting. It makes him look, I don't want Bland. I don't want Joe Montana. I don't want Derek Jeter all the time. I want the people who are going to blow up all the time. A lot of people didn't like Caitlin Clark because she was kind of playing the middle, and you wanted controversial, you wanted something else, and she wasn't giving you that because she was giving you her authentic self. So the best people in any business are the ones who are able to listen, define what their message is, and then continue to say the same thing over and over again to make sure that they're reaching the audience that they want to reach, because you have all the power, not the person asking the questions.
I like it. I'm glad you mentioned Caitlin Clark because I do want to ask you about that. So I've been following the battle between Caitlin Clark and Angela Reese. Angel Reese for a while. And I came across, I have a lot of thoughts on it. I'm not trying to ruin my career and talk about it totally, and I'm not as versed in sports as you are. But she made a mention about how Caitlin Clark, she talked about how Black women are the reason the WNBA exists, and all the credit and power goes to them. I'm here because of them, and we need to help raise marginalized voices, and and there's people that were jumping in the conversation saying yes, we have to highlight and support diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, and these were all white people that were saying this. And I thought counterintuitively around this. I thought, wow, okay, she's giving a compliment to Black women that have, created the sport, which is beautiful. It's something that needs to be said. But I was also like, you're actually the minority in this business. Like, you're the minority. So your voice needs to be highlighted, not necessarily the Black women's voices. I'm just thinking counterintuitive from a business perspective. And then I was also thinking to myself, for her to say that made me think, wow, that reminds me of that exhibit I saw at the African American History Museum, which is a video that talks about the exporting of the NBA and how, people are going to other countries and training other, teams and coaches, and they're bringing more white players into the NBA. And at some point, the NBA is going to, look a lot different than it does now. And then I was thinking to myself, well, maybe this is the move. I know this is me thinking, okay, this is my own personal opinion. Maybe this is the move. The WNBA needs to raise money. They need more money, and they need to bring, women in that, men like to look at maybe. And maybe that's why there's this battle going on. It's a battle between white women and Black women in basketball. And it disturbs me. I'm very disturbed by this. And I told you in the beginning, I'm not like a statistic sports fanatic person that's been following this my whole life, but I look at this battle and I feel like it's bigger than just these two tremendous women athletes. I feel like it's really it's a conversation of who's going to control the WNBA and who's going to represent the WNBA. And we don't necessarily want it to be Black women anymore. You know what I mean? And I feel like, that's me looking at it from an outside perspective. And I know that I'm not alone in this perspective. And I'm just really curious, what you think about this whole conversation, because that LinkedIn thing, I was involved in that conversation. It got really bananas really quick.
Mm-hmm. So I grew up in Brooklyn, in a very mixed race neighborhood. Was around basketball my whole life. I didn't see things as much as literally black and white. I think at the end of the day, both Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark are amazing for the WNBA, are amazing for sports overall, because they brought conversations together that would not be happening, like you just mentioned. So the question is, how do you reach a solution? Now, someone who's always got a microphone in front of them in the spotlight will slip up from time to time and may not think about what they're saying sometimes and may say the wrong thing. But I think that there is nothing wrong with the amount of players, amazing athletes, who are going to be given a stage now going forward because of what Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and many of the players before them have opened up. And that's the growth of any kind of business. Is we always worry about, what happened to the pioneers? Where did they go? Well, the pioneers are still here, but the opportunities that they created are going to continue to grow, because at the end of the day, it's something we want to watch. We want to know more about their personalities, and we can do that 24/7 now. And whether we like them, whether we dislike them, we want to watch because it's an interesting story. We love good stories. We don't want bland.
Yeah.
And that's what athletes do for us all the time, whether it's the Olympics, the NBA, the NFL, wherever you go down the line. We want to follow interesting people who we can aspire to and figure out why we want to be part of them because they get us excited.
I love it. And you have really good insights on that. I think that watching the fashion lines, and the fashion walks now with all the athletes is really, really interesting to me. And I'm also reminded of a conversation I had when I was at a volleyball tournament for my son. It was at a bar, and just know I was at a bar and someone else was at a bar with me. And once again, I was back to, talking about money and sports. And the man I was talking to said to me, yeah, well, if it weren't for Title IX, we'd have a lot more money for our kids in volleyball. And I was at the time, I literally, Joe, I did not even know what he was talking about at that point. I knew about Title IX, but I didn't know what he meant. And I actually, for a change, stayed a little bit quiet, and I went back to do some research, and I started understanding. Oh, so Title IX money, they're giving it to women's sports that are not, football or basketball for men, and that's where the money is. So, what do you think about this guy who was blaming Title IX for the demise and the not getting what he needed for his own kid? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wish you had been
Here's
there.
The deal.
Slap him down, right?
Sports is you eat what you kill. If you're great, you get to the top. Now,
okay.
I think that, youth sports is another whole thing, but I think if someone wants to blame somebody else, then maybe you should go and find to do something else other than what that was. Title IX did not take, it's like saying affirmative action is taking things away from certain people. It's created opportunities, but at the end of the day, we're all battling for something. And if you are an amazing athlete, you will find your own way through. Now, it may not be going to Notre Dame to play football, but that doesn't mean that's the most important thing to you because you have to define wherever it is you're going forward. I think Title IX, 51 years now, Billie Jean King, who I've been around, helped lead the charge, is finally now where athletes who happen to be women are finally getting their due. And I think it's tremendous. I've worked in most women's sports throughout the course of my career. I've worked in the highest levels of men's sports. And at the end of the day, what I really want is just sports. I don't care whether it's women's sports, men's sports. Just give me the best stories and the best athletes. That's all I care about.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. And I sometimes, I still keep this conversation in my head because I do try to understand the funding conversation. And one of the things that we talked about at the SCIM conference was funding and money and NIL, which you have a lot of information on in scholarships. And something changed when that judge ruled that, I think the ruling, I have to find the ruling, but maybe you can actually say the ruling with the NIL, but now high school athletes can get money. They can become name, image, likeness, and they can get paid and not get kicked out of the NCAA. Do you think this is a good thing that's happened? Yes.
Well,
really,
I think like anything else, in the world we're in today, we swing one way and then we swing all the way the other way. You have to find the middle ground because for years, if you were an athlete on a college campus and you were a trombone player on a college campus or you were a great mathematician, you could get compensated for anything you want. The only people who could not get compensated were student athletes. And that was wrong because the universities made a tremendous amount of money off the back of these people. And do I think that scholarships and books were important? Yes. But you can't go out and sell my jersey or put me in a video game and not expect to compensate me. Now, like anything else, unfortunately, we'll go to the other extreme now. I think what's going on in name, image, and likeness right now in college has to be regulated by some government form at some point because it's way, way too far the other way.
What's happening?
You're seeing athletes paid, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars just for showing up. They're able to transfer after 3 months. There's no justification for what they're doing other than it's a money grab right now. And most of it is cash. There's no return on the investment. You're just handing people cash. And I think you'll find somewhere down the road where the middle ground will be played, where athletes will be compensated across the board. They'll be able to figure out how to do it, not just financially, but work out. Hopefully, many of them will work out their academics as well, because that's really important. And we'll find a way to do this. But I think name, image, and likeness is 100% the right thing to do. Took a long time to come. Now we're just overcompensating. We got to find the middle.
Why doesn't men's volleyball have money? High college, like what's your idea around? I mean, this is the conversation with the Title IX piece where he's like, we don't have money because of Title IX. Is there any truth to that?
That's like saying we don't have any money because, well, first of all, there is money in certain schools. He's looking at the wrong schools. Loyola Chicago gives scholarships for men's basketball, men's volleyball. You have to go find the right places. Now, there are people who could turn around and say, you know what, there's no scholarships for men's field hockey. No, because it's not a Division I sport. There are not many women. There've only been a couple women who've tried to play tackle football in college. Well, that's not fair. Well, it is kind of fair. There are plenty of other opportunities. The opportunities don't have to exist just because you want them to be. There has to be a marketplace for it. A friend of mine says all the time, every day there are 3 million people in the world who play hopscotch. That doesn't mean we need a professional hopscotch league.
Sorry. That's insane. I mean, I guess you could have said double Dutch. Double Dutch would have been better instead of hopscotch.
Mm-hmm. Same thing.
Okay, so enough on that NIL stuff. You're right. It seems like the wild, wild west of chaos, and I would love my son to get some NIL money, no doubt, but I also realize it just seems out of control. I want to talk about hockey for a minute.
Sure.
Because hockey. And I know hockey. I love hockey. I never thought I would say that, but I have a hockey kid. I cannot, and okay, you have a lot of background on this, and I swear to God, Joe, you need to be, I don't know why the WNBA hasn't hired you like full time, because I just feel like your knowledge and expertise and your historical understanding is really important and could add a lot of value to these conversations. Anyway, that being said, back to hockey. So hockey. I am a multiracial Black woman. My sons, all three of them, are mixed race as well. And my son, who's a hockey player, is brown. And everywhere I go, every place, every game, every event, like he's literally almost always the only one. And there are never any Black women where I'm going. I went to a hockey game a couple weeks ago, and it looked like Madison Square Garden, this last election. I mean, I was the only Black person there, except for the people that were security guards and food workers. What is happening in hockey? Why is this happening from your perspective? And I've talked to a lot of people about this. I'm looking for your opinion on why is this sport so white, and why is it so hard to get people of color in the sport? I mean, look, Snoop Dogg was trying to buy a hockey team, and he's trying, he was wearing hockey jerseys on his hip hop videos. He talks about this all the time. He wants Black people to see they have a chance in hockey. There's other sports than this. And this is the same thing that I was talking about in New York. It's like every tall kid doesn't want to play basketball. A lot of tall kids, they love volleyball. They're obsessed. And it's like a huge thing. So what's going on in hockey? Like, what can we do to fix this?
Number one, super expensive. Hard to get people to get in on the bottom line. Culturally, hockey is the official sport of Canada, not the official sport of the United States. I think it just takes a lot to get people involved because it takes a lot of time. It is really the only sport, when you think about it, you need ice in a building to go play. You don't need ice in a building to go play basketball, football, lacrosse, soccer, chess. It doesn't matter. You're limited by the amount of little sheets that are in a specific area, and it's just much, much more difficult to do. Now, I have two friends who have adopted mixed race kids who have kids who are hockey players because they love to play hockey, but they were exposed, high net worth people exposed them to it at a young age, and that's how it played. So again, it's just a cultural thing. I mean, I don't know how you change that when the money and kind of the environment around it. I think the NHL loves having multicultural programs. They have tons of street hockey programs. They hope that leads to a bigger pipeline. It takes a tremendous amount of time to get there.
That's a narrative I hear. It's a narrative. I hear the same. I know. I hear the same narrative. Narrative, and I'm waiting to hear a narrative that's, that is counterintuitive, or divergent. And I'm not hearing one.
But same thing in golf. You know, you need a lot of money to get invested in golf, even though arguably the greatest golfer of all time, African American, brought up by his father. You know, his father and his mother trained him to be there. His son is now a good golfer, Tiger Woods. But it just takes a lot of time. And sometimes, you know, there may be people sitting around, well, why can't I get that opportunity somewhere else? Because this is something that I love. I don't think it's any really different in any other area, music, the arts, science. You'll find the outliers, but it's just hard to break through in anything that we do. I mean, but that's the challenge. We love hard things to do sometimes. That's the most important thing we can do.
Yeah, I mean, listen, hockey is a true meritocracy. I mean, you really got to be good. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel that my son Trace, you know, who's varsity for Loyola Academy, you know, he's one of their best players, and it's not easy being one of your best players, being one of the best, and playing that hard of a sport. It's violent, it's painful, and there is a lot of travel. So I understand, like, from a black mom perspective, that the commitment it would take for a black mom to ensure that their kid is at all the hockey games, stays at the games, is always on the road, travels, and in the high net worth rooms that you're talking about. I mean, it takes a lot of emotional stamina as a black woman to be in those rooms and stand with your back straight and manage and navigate those environments. I mean, I'm coming from a business place, so for me, it's not I don't have any hesitation to this. But there's a lot of pressure, and I really do wish that the NHL could do more. I think there are some teams that are doing more, and of course, being from Chicago, I think the Chicago Blackhawks, led by Danny Wirtz, he's a fourth generation Chicago Blackhawks owner and Breakthrough Beverage. I think he's doing a lot of work, not only in the community, but he's also doing a lot of work even in his corporate staff that's running the team. You know, he's doing a lot there in terms of diversity, and it's not because of any DEI initiatives or requirements. It's really because he knows it's the right thing to do, and I respect him so much for the work I'm seeing him do here in the state. I'm kind of interested in on another conversation. So, what are you trying to accomplish at Columbia? What is the name of your class? What are you hoping to that your students walk away with after they leave one of your classes or leave your environment or leave your world there? Like, what do you want them to be knowing?
So my first class, every semester, I've done it for the last 3 years with this class, I literally give them a sponge. And I tell them, I want you to leave and come back and tell me something the next week that you absorbed somewhere from this program or from the city. And that's really what I want them to do. I want them to understand how they can tell their own story, how they can relate to other people's stories, how they can be open-minded about looking at things that aren't so black and white all the time, and figure out how you take all these kind of crumbs and put them together and make a really interesting cake that will help you build a business, regardless of whether you're interested in communications or not, as a profession. That's pretty simple. So I've been doing this class now 17 years. It's evolved over time. We do a podcast.
And you invented it, right? Like you invented this class. I invented
it. It was kind of the idea. I wrote the first. I mean, it was kind of fake it till you make it. But we did the book. We do a podcast. We've been doing 9 years now, and it's all about effective storytelling. And
what's the podcast called?
It's called The Cusp Show, the Columbia University Sports Podcast. Myself and my co-host Tom Richardson have been doing it basically every week for 9 years. And you'll be on at some point soon in the fall, in the spring.
Oh, I love it.
But that's really what it is. That's what the class is. It's about how you listen, learn, and adapt your story. And when you go work somewhere, figure out what the story is of the place that you work.
I think that's tremendous. Are you seeing with the young people that they're really engaged? I mean, yes. Are they locked in and active? Are they having conversations with you? I mean, do you feel like, are you seeing any change from this group of students versus maybe students that you were working with 5 or 6 years ago? Are they the same kids?
I think they're more engaged now than ever before because they
Why?
have a device in their hands that is giving them media all the time. And they're constantly trying to figure out where they fit in a narrative. They're trying to figure out how they juggle their time. They're trying to figure out in a hyper-competitive world of business, what they need to be successful. And I'm hoping that I'm teaching them something that will help them be successful no matter what they do.
I really love that. So I've got some rapid fire questions for you that I want to ask to close out the show. Is AI ever going to replace a real athletic sports fan experience?
No. It will enhance. It won't replace. No.
What is the team that you root for to lose every single time?
Wow. It's funny. When you get older, you root for people less than teams. I can't think of a team that I would like to lose all the time. I like seeing teams win. I think that's helpful, especially some of the New York teams that I followed for a long time that don't win all the time.
So you don't want to answer the question?
I don't actually. I don't want anybody to lose all the time. I think that's a terrible way to go through life.
I mean, listen, I know people that literally hate Notre Dame football.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. I mean, like I said, after all these years, you kind of learn more about other people that are around, and you root. Like I said, I root more for people than I do for teams.
I love it. I love it. So I mean, this is probably like a cliche, but who do you think is the most underrated basketball player, male or female right now? That's actually, and here, let me add another layer to this. This is a player that if they were no longer playing with the team, they would feel it, but they would look around and say, "Oh my God, like I cannot believe we let this person go. This person really has made a difference, and we definitely didn't give him enough credit for it."
Well, I think they know, but Jalen Brunson playing for the Knicks is I think, the most underrated. Even though he's been tremendously successful, I think what he brings to the chemistry of the New York Knicks changed the entire set of where the Knicks were.
Wow. Okay, so when I looked at your website and you listed all the movies and sports, there was one movie that you didn't have listed there, and I couldn't believe it.
What movie?
On the Waterfront.
It's a little old for me.
You have some old movies on there, Joe.
Mm, yeah.
So why isn't that one of the greatest sports movies you've ever seen? I mean, listen, there's a line in that movie. Okay, you're like, nah. I'm like shocked. There's a line in that movie, and it's a famous line. I could have been a contender. Now I'm nothing but a bum. And like, I feel like that encapsulates so much about sports parents, regret, looking back. Just it's so much. And tell me why that wasn't on your list.
I didn't think of it. So now that's the beauty of being able to update websites. Now I can go and do that.
So you are going to add it?
I will now.
So what's your favorite sports movie on that list? You've got a ton of movies on your website. And by the way, Joe's website is joefavorito.com, which is JoeFavorito.com. It is packed full of so much information.
A lot of stuff.
So there's so much going on there. So go ahead. Tell me, what is your favorite sports film?
Rocky, by far.
Oh, sure.
The original Rocky. So.
Okay. The original. So you're not really into the rest of the Rockies?
Well, I worked on Creed 2. Which I thought
you
was
did? What did you do on Creed 2?
I did help do all the sports PR for it. So.
Okay, you know what? You need to update your website. What's going on? That's not anywhere.
It's an intern job coming up next semester, JinJa.
That is not. You got to get going on that. So, how did they find you to work on that film?
Just being around. I worked on a lot of different films over time, and that was one that popped up. And it's been great. I'm working on. By the time this comes out, there'll be 2 other films that I'm working on that will be out. So.
And you can't talk about those.
No, I can. Green and Gold is one. It's with Craig T. Nelson. He's a farmer who literally bets the farm on the Green Bay Packers. It comes out in early January. And there's another one based on a wrestler named Anthony Robles with one leg who won the NCAA championship called Unstoppable. Don Cheadle plays his coach. That comes out at the end of January.
Oh, my goodness. You are really busy. So, you know what? I'm not even going to ask my next rapid fire question. What are you actually working on besides these 2 films? Like what's kind of in the pipeline that you can talk about? Because
lots of stuff. I worked for USAA with Army Navy, which was amazing. One of the greatest experiences you can ever be around is the Army Navy game. I helped Monumental Sports and Entertainment on all their strategic communications. I've been doing a lot of work with the NWSL over the last few years. There's some startups that I work with. So, it's kind of a mixed bag of tricks that you put together.
And if you had another opportunity that you haven't had yet, what is it and what would it be? Something that you haven't done, because I feel like you've done a lot.
Professionally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to run an organization at some point, even if it's a minor league team. I think that's the one thing, is being responsible for the entire P&L would be great. I don't know if it'll ever happen. I think I could do it. That would be the one thing.
That's really shocking. So I'm going to have you come back on my show, because there's some things that, when I was researching you, I couldn't find a lot of things. And you just told me a few things. I thought, you know what?
That's why it's so dark behind me, JinJa.
Why? I mean, honestly, it's been completely tremendous and amazing. There's just so much going on in your life. And I really knew when I met you at the Skim, I'm like, wow, he's got a lot happening. And, Shauna from, New York Liberty said, oh yeah, you got to talk to this guy. He's everything. So I really love this. Yeah, I really love this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on my show. And everybody, thank you for listening to my show, the Honest Field Guide podcast. And I promise I'm going to have Joe come back on because I've got more questions for him. And he did just say that he's going to have me on his show, which is
100%.
even more exciting. So thank you so much for coming, Joe.
Talk to you soon.
The Honest Field Guide is produced by the team at Burt Creative, where brand and multi-channel strategies are designed to help you get attention, grow, scale, and keep up with the pace of change. The music on the podcast is written and performed by Utah Carroll. You can find their songs everywhere online to buy or stream. The opinions expressed on the Honest Field Guide are solely those of the host and guests.